Hi, I'm Thomas Bowles, Prince William County Agricultural Extension Agent. Welcome to our video.
Are you an intern? No, I'm not.
Is
You
that
just
good?
came from the
All
program?
right. Well, good morning.
Good morning.
Hi.
It's nice to be here with you. I am not a professional grower. I don't sell this stuff, but we've done. I learned shiitake mushrooms from a Department of Forestry guy, Charlie Becker, who's become a friend, and for a number of years we've done this demonstration at the farmers market in Madison County, where I'm based, in the extension office there, and had master gardeners and master naturalists involved with helping with the demonstration. We processed, I don't know, 50, 60 logs, and had them for sale at the farmers market and had sampling. So this will be a kind of a micro version of that. So a little bit about me. I'm a forester with Virginia Cooperative Extension based in Madison, and I serve our northern district. I've met some of you at some times, but northern district includes Prince William County, so as well as the Shenandoah Valley and Charlottesville, and actually live in Charlottesville. So one thing I want to say up front is why a forester with extension would care about this. Well, one, I've learned to love shiitake mushrooms. They're delicious, right? But from the professional side, our interest is multifaceted. One is anytime we can make a connection, build a connection between people and trees is a good thing. And you as master gardener appreciate that, right? And so to grow some food right off of a tree, which is what shiitake is. Shi means tree, take means fungus, so this is tree fungus. So that's a great opportunity to make a connection. On a small scale, it's an opportunity to utilize low grade or small diameter stuff. So this stuff could be firewood, but value added would be shiitake, and besides that, it's just going to be wasted in a tree harvest or a tree removal in a logging situation or a yard situation. So in logging scenarios, it's not effective, efficient, practical to kind of get these sort of logs, although I have when I need them for a demonstration, work with the logger to get some. But at any rate, so there's a utilization component to it as well. And it's fun. It is kind of fun. So you can grow your own mushroom and be confident that it's safe to eat. So I think that there may have been some marketing at some point with this about mushroom ID. That's not happening. I don't want to tell you. I can't get into that. I can point out puffball and shiitake, and that's about it. So yeah, we will not do mushroom identification. How many of you have eaten mushroom? Shiitake. Okay. How many of you know how to spell shiitake? I had to learn. I misspelled it once with one I. Well, that makes shit. We're not talking about that, right? Oops, that went Facebook Live. Scratch that. Not supposed to say bad words. So it is shiitake, and as I mentioned, shi is tree in Japanese, and take is mushroom. So this or fungus. So this is the tree fungus. And I've got a sample here. These are actually dried. I have a log yard at home of shiitake logs. These are some that I brought. I soaked these, and maybe I don't know. I should have soaked them earlier. We would have had mushrooms growing. We might find some little buds coming out here by the end of the morning. I don't know. But this is one that took off, and I just left it. So these are dry now. You're welcome to so light we can probably just pass it around. Now you'll notice that these have a lot of bites out of them. The major pest with these is slugs. Kind of nasty. And in fact, I got home one evening, 2 evenings ago, and I started gathering these up. And after dark, is when they come up. And I was just flicking them off and squishing them, and it got so slippery under there, so many of them. So anyway, but they don't eat much at once. But if you can see that you eat them all away, you let them go. So anyway, these are small. What happened here is that it was wet enough that they started to grow, and then they got dry. And so they just kind of stopped, went dormant, so to speak. If I had continued to water these, sprinkle them or something like that, then they would have kept growing. But they're perfectly edible, they're good, and we'll just go ahead and pass this around. It's light. Once it starts growing mushrooms, the wood starts decomposing, right? So the logs get lighter and lighter. So these will be, the heaviest these logs are going to be is right now. As far as species, these are all white oak. You can use red oak, you can use sweet gum, and there are some other species. Oak lasts the longest, and of the oaks, those in the white oak group will last the longest, and that's simply because white oak is more rot resistant than the red oaks. Oaks are divided into two groups. You know that? The red oaks and the white oaks. And this is white oak. You want to see the leaf? The leaf was brought with one. So rounded tips or rounded lobes. The key though, actually with white oak versus red oak is it doesn't have a bristle tip. So willow oak is kind of rounded, right? Is willow oak in the red oak group or the white oak group?
White.
It's in the red. It looks, it's okay.
Well, I got it backwards.
Yeah, I know, it's okay. I have to think about it myself because it has a little bristle tip on it. So that's the key for distinguishing. And besides the leaves, the key, the sexual difference of that for us today is that the wood in white oak has closed tyloses, or has tyloses. So the cells have an extra layer of covering, which is why barrels are made out of white oak, not red oak. You make a barrel, wine barrel, whiskey barrel, water barrel, whatever barrel, rain barrel, yeah, that's popular, right? Out of red oak, it'll just run right through it. So white oak has clothes, which makes them more rot resistant, which makes them a little preferred over red oak for this use. Although red oak is fine, you kind of, you use what you get, right? But I chose white oak for today because it was handy and it's good. The sweet gum that you can use won't last as long, but it works. And then there are other woods for other mushrooms. Ailanthus can be used for something I can't remember right now. I haven't done it. Oyster mushrooms. Thank you. Yes, oyster mushrooms. Mm-hmm.
What about hickory? I have a lot of hickory.
I don't know what hickory can be used for, but probably something. So I'm no expert in all this stuff, but I've got some experience with shiitake. So you feel free to ask me other questions I don't know. I'll just say. But if you're getting to shiitake, I might be able to help. Okay, so the process is to cut the logs. Preferably you cut them in the late winter or early spring before the leaves come out, before the buds swell. And the reason for that is that the bark is tight. If you do it in the spring when the buds have swollen and the leaves are starting to grow, then the bark is looser and you'll just more likely damage and remove some bark. And you want the bark to be intact. You want the sugars to be in here and for the log not to dry out too fast. Now these I cut 3 weeks ago and just put them in a basement sort of environment. You do want them to rest for some period of time before you inoculate them because they still have antifungal properties. So trees are designed to resist fungus. Fungus kills trees. Now shiitake is a very weak fungus, and because of that, you need to let these things rest so that those antifungal properties sort of dissipate away. So 3 or 4 weeks should be sufficient for that. And the bark is tight. So in the middle of the growing season, you can do this too. You just need to let it rest a little longer. And it's hotter, and so it's nice to do it in the early spring. You can see better and all that. You don't have to deal with leaves. You take off any branches. Ideally, what you want is a clear log. But if you've got branches, then you just trim those off, and we'll cover these with wax. That's what we have right here. Because once we get the spawn in here, we want to seal this so that it's pretty tight and not losing moisture content. Fungus wants moisture, right? So that is one of the last steps that we'll do here. Okay, so species, harvest, let them rest. Those of you who have the answer key there with you in the publication, am I missing any steps so far? I think that's right. I think that's about it. And tool-wise, this can be very simple, or you can get a little bit more complex. You can use a simple drill bit, and you can use your thumb, or you can buy wooden dowels that are already impregnated with the fungus and just tap them in. And that's a great way to do it if you're just going to do this for a couple of logs, a few logs for kind of home use. For any sort of scale, and you want to move up to some a little bit more specialized tools.
Can you use wood that's already down, like you got a
Great question.
I'm sorry?
Great question, thank you. No. If you so if you have a dead tree around, that's already been occupied by other fungus. And so
Even if it's white oak, it's still...
yeah. Now, if you had a tree that was alive and suddenly died, you might be able to. Which we had some of that, right, over the past few years. But there might already be some, if it died slowly, which most trees do, even the ones that we think are sudden death, right? There can still be some other fungus in there. The objective is to get these away from the other fungus, let them rest, so that the only fungus in there is shiitake. And when you get it inoculated and the fungus then grows, it doesn't allow other fungus in. So yeah, thank you. Good question. Dead wood that you see laying around or whatever, no. Very recently dead, like it died, or maybe. I do have a friend who had a tree in his backyard that died. He actually inoculated a tree. I don't know if that's working yet or not. But they did it last year. So some of the tools. This is a very nice drill bit for drilling. It just has a stop, and it goes the right depth for this tool. So everything has to kind of fit together. But if you use the regular drill bit, you can still use loose spawn. What we have here, the sawdust spawn. I'll pass this around actually. So this is so this is mostly sawdust. You see the little white stuff in here that is the fungal property. Some of the fungus. Yeah, there's a little bit of white
there you go.
right there.
Thanks.
So and so you could, theoretically drill your hole and just kind of shove this in there, right? But like anything, you start with a little bit, and if you like it, then you want to have a little bit better efficiency. So that's where the special drill bit comes in, and the other tools. When we do this on a larger scale, I actually use an angle grinder with an adapter that drills holes with this drill bit, but with an adapter on an angle grinder, and that goes really fast. Boom, boom, boom. Instead of drill. But we've got enough logs here that for those of you who want to can actually do some drilling and inoculation yourself. So these inoculator tools, then this is just a palm style where you set it on over top of the hole and tap it in there. It's hollow. You jab it into the spawn, and then you press it in. This is a thumb. This is a palm. Just two different sizes. So, and the final step then is once you got all the holes filled up, is to take one of these daubers. This is hot wax, and cover each hole and cover the end. All right. So where's my assistant? All right. So let's go ahead and do one. Linda, thank you, Linda. I do have a catalog up here. You can pass this around too if you want to. I'm not promoting this company. There are others. This is just where I've ended up. They have got a lot of good educational information in there as well. So this spawn came from there. There are different varieties that are for different kind of climate, weather conditions, different types of wood. To some extent, red oak, white oak, different size mushrooms. I don't find a lot of difference in the mushroom taste, but they do look different and they will behave a little differently in terms of how they grow. So this was like a brick. You see all the white stuff, that's fungus. So I'm just breaking this up. bit. And we will put some of this into a container that we can jab into easily.
Hey Adam, how much does that stuff cost?
Oh. Yes. Tom, do you remember how much that cost? It's in the catalog, actually.
Can't remember.
$30,
Wow.
$40.
If that, yeah.
So this is what you want. This all broken up pretty fine, so that the fungus is mixed in with the sawdust. The sawdust is just a carrier or filler, so that you got enough volume to do something with. So simply jab that in here, and now that's full, and then it'll just come out like a whatever you want to call that.
A Tootsie Roll.
A Tootsie Roll. That's very nice. Yes, that's not what I was going to say. Thank you. And that is the perfect size for this, lengthwise, diameter-wise. So let's do a
$25. Sawdust spawn, $25.
$25 for a brick of this stuff.
If you buy 100 of them, it goes down to 10.
Okay. Let's go ahead and do this big one. That'll be out of the way. So it's important to do a good pattern on this, which is, I think that says probably 6 to 8 inches. You're going to space these holes, and then you're going to offset it as a diagonal pattern, the same thing, okay? And you don't want it right at the end, you want it a couple inches from the end. And then you would go on around doing it again and again. That'll be enough for now to just kind of demonstrate. We often will roll these down kind of assembly line. Have someone drilling, have someone plugging the holes, and have the wax being put on. So you just line it up, push it in there. Kind of feel it should be firm, it should be a little bit below the hole so the wax sits in there. You want to try? Yeah, you start on your end.
Let me see that.
It's a great thing to do and have meaningful family conversations while you're doing it. What do you want to talk about?
Oh, we've seen it. It's been going.
You're good. So yeah, that's good. That's good. Might be a little bit more there and a little bit more there. So one thing with the with jabbing this in there is you want to you see me jabbing it. If you just do it once or twice, it might not be packed in there and give a nice tight Tootsie Roll, right? I got a better tool.
I was going to say that.
Always pick the best tool.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so we'll do more here, but the final stage with this is to wax, put the wax on. And another way to do this instead of wax, you can also buy the wax from wherever. You can, my friend who taught me this, he'll take old candles and add to it just to kind of stretch it out and make use of it.
Would you use beeswax or no?
You could use some beeswax. You wouldn't use grafting wax. I tried that one, way too sticky.
What kind is it?
Grafting wax.
Okay.
So the key with this is, with the kind of wax, is that it needs to be a little bit flexible. And just candle wax, hardens a lot and then cracks and will just fall off.
Can it be smelly candles?
Sure.
Does it matter if it's smelly candles?
Doesn't matter, yeah.
You're going to get scented mushrooms.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
You use
So yeah, this is a paraffin wax. Yeah. So you just do this, and when you come up here, or if you want to come up and look at it, that's fine. It's just kind of filling these holes so that it holds that in there and conserves the moisture. And the dauber will get all messy, and that's just the way it is. And we're going to cover each end. So any cut surfaces we want to cover. Some people will take this and actually dip the end into the wax, which is faster, but uses a lot more wax. And hey, when you've got volunteers, you go the cheap way with more effort, right? So that's it. I will usually tag these as well. And so the strain that we're using here is, that strain was, I'll put it there, it's West Wind, and then the year, so 01. And staple that onto the end. And that's it. Well, I need to finish this one, but that's it. When you take this, then from here, you take it and you put it in the woods, ideally on the ground, on the leaf litter layer. You don't want it in contact with dirt just because it gets kind of messy. And if it is in contact with dirt, brush that off later. And that will incubate for about a year. You might get some mushrooms. Say if we did this in the early spring, you might get some mushrooms in the fall. Some of it depends on how big the log is. So first of all, the run of spawn needs to go throughout that whole log before it starts fruiting. So the smaller logs will fruit earlier, but they won't last as long because there's not as much wood there, right? And so you'll let those lay down on the forest floor for a year, and then the following spring, you would prop those up in some sort of way. I prop them up against trees. If you get very many of them, then you want to build something that you can kind of lean them up like a teepee. There's other methods of kind of the crib style, like log cabin, boom, 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 like that. The problem with that then is you have to take them apart to get the mushrooms. And you have a choice then, once they do start fruiting, of forcing the fruit. Like you're going to have a party and you want to have shiitake mushrooms for the party, then you can soak, what I did with those logs. And actually what I did with this one too is just, I just didn't let the slugs eat all of it. So you soak them, and in about a week you could harvest those. 4 to 7 days, depends on the temperature and stuff like that. What I do is I just kind of pay attention to the weather. When it's rained and it's relatively warm in the spring and in the fall, then I'll go check and see if there are any mushrooms to harvest. And if there are, I pick them off. If I'm late and they've dried off, then I pick off the dry ones. No problem. These ones that I brought today that Nancy is going to cook up. Is it light? Maybe it's out of gas. Eating myself. But do check it because I probably have a gas can. Yeah, that'd be great. Sure.
Could you put them in a crawl space in a basement, or does it have to be in the woods?
So good question. It needs to be the shade. Does not need to be the woods. But the thing that helps with the woods is that it's a moist, shady environment. You don't want too much wind, and it does need to get moisture. So crawl space is probably not going to have moisture. At least you hope not. Right? You can, if you don't have any trees, you can put it up against the shady side of the house if there's not much of an overhang, So the moisture in the shade is what's critical. You could theoretically do it in your basement or in a crawl space, but you'd have to go and water them or soak them. I soak them in a Rubbermaid trash can and turn them over to get the other end because they're too tall, But if you're doing very many, then you would want like a feed trough, a water trough, or people will have a pond or a creek that they put them in. Oh, and one other tip. So sometimes these things seem like they should be fruiting by now, and they're not. So you have to beat them into submission. You have to actually thump them. So take a stick or something like that and literally thump them. And that will, you know, wake them up. It's an odd thing. I don't know why that is. But it's, in fact, when I moved all these logs, I was going to, when I moved from my woods up to my garage, I was going to soak them. I was going to wait a few days and I was going to soak them. In a few days, they were blooming. I hadn't done any soaking, it's just that I moved them, I handled them. And there had been some moisture earlier. So I went to the woods, haven't, because I haven't handled them. So you gotta lay hands on them sometimes. And then how long will they last? Depends on the size. You know, a log like this will last 4 or 5 years probably. A log like this, 2 or 3.
And it'll keep bearing? I mean,
yeah.
Otherwise.
Yeah, so your first flush will be largest, and then it'll kind of dwindle off, and it'll just disintegrate into nothing, essentially.
So you don't need to inoculate them?
No, you don't need to re-inoculate them. So what you'll notice in a year is, so this is all black, but at first, when it's first flushing out, or not flushing out, but when the spawn is making its run through the log, you'll see white. In fact, I've got this great picture, I should have brought it. Wherever the drill holes were, you see this white little square. So it's starting, you know, first of all runs lengthwise and then colonizes the rest of, which for those of you who remember your compartmentalization of decaying trees, was the weakest walls. The weakest walls is wall 1, which moves up and down. Okay, so that's where the fungus is going to go first. Yep, coated, that's right. Yes? No. Yeah, so cut, store for 3 weeks, 3 or 4 weeks to let the antifungal properties dissipate, and here we are. Yeah, you wouldn't soak them until the following year. If you want to force the bloom, you have to just, these things just need to rest and let the spawn run through the log. Yeah, so it, you know, if you want to schedule something, like if someone got into this big time and they're in a farmer's market or supplied to you know, a restaurant or something like that, then you need to have a consistent supply. So you want a large volume where you're regularly doing soaks when there's not natural conditions that are bringing that on anyway. But for me, and for most of us, just kind of hobby for fun, just let the weather dictate when your party is.
So true. Can you actually use a spray mist? I mean, can you just mist the
so, like this one that fruit. Once they fruit, if it, and this time of year is a good example. So we have a rain, and like the morning's nice and cool. Say we had a rain, and the mushrooms start coming out like this, and then it gets hot and dry. Yeah, you can then spray them with the garden hose. Just keep it going to make them go ahead and mature in size.
How do you know when they're mature or
right.
how big do they get?
Okay.
When do you know to pick them?
Yeah, good question. That's just where I was going to go to. Yeah. So when are they ripe? Well, you can eat them anytime. You know, they won't change, but if they're growing, you want to let them get as big as they can, right? Unlike zucchini, I guess. Right? So they will get. That's right. So it depends on the strain, but some of them will get that big. Others will get about that big. The ideal, like for gourmet, and this has nothing to do with flavor, but is the end of the cap just a little bit down. If they get past that, then they flatten out. I don't worry about that at all. I go get them when I can get them, you know, and there's no difference. I don't like it when the slugs take very much, but yeah. So the ideal maturity is when the cap is still just barely down before it flattens out. And that will be maximum time size.
When you make your little peaches, does that stay in contact with
them up. Yeah, in fact, I've done that. Put them like on cinder blocks. Yeah. 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 Yeah, they'll find it somehow. But if you're checking it, you know, on a regular basis, you're not going to have much loss. I don't do very good stuff checking mine. That's one problem, you know, if they're back in the back, whatever, out of sight, out of mind, you can forget about them. I know lots of people bought logs and totally lost them. Where is it? Right. So yeah, so lay it down on the forest floor for a year, and then prop it up that following year, and just check on it. And if it's not doing something, bump it.
Would any like organic pesticide work to keep the slugs off? Say like
I don't know.
or something like that.
I don't know.
I think a saucer of beer, so the slugs all go there.
Yeah. So take a 6-pack out, watch, and pour your last one out as a donation to the slugs, right?
Adam,
Okay. Okay. Yeah, right.
Adam, there is a newer slugicide that's iron based. That's a lot safer than some of the more chemical based slug based. I've only seen it in a couple places, but it's based on chelated iron, and it seems to work pretty well.
Okay. Cool. So, okay. Any other questions?
How much of the bag is that last? How many?
Yeah, good question. I think one bag will, I think they say in that catalog, do 20 to 30 logs. Of course, it depends on the size. I think that's what I usually end up buying 2 or 3 bags. In the refrigerator. So I bought this in the spring, and it's still good. And the way you can tell it's still good, I took it out of the refrigerator and set it on my kitchen table for a few days, and nothing was turning black. Bad fungus is going to turn black. So it's still white. So yeah, it's good.
How long can you keep it in the refrigerator?
Well, this I've kept in the refrigerator for 3 months, 4 months. I didn't think I'd keep it that long. So yeah, it'll keep, you know, so if you're going to do something like this, you feel free to order stuff. You don't have to worry too much about time. Just order it ahead of time, put it in the refrigerator. It'll keep easily for a couple months.
Find a mushroom partner, share a bag, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Yeah. Yes, sir.
You put it back in the woods or whatever, and on the leaves, these are the other fungi that come along with the cats.
Right.
So what are you gonna do?
So that's why partly why we're sealing it, and that's why we're inoculating it, so that this fungus colonizes it, nothing else gets in it. Once it's in here, nothing else will get in it.
Even on top of it.
Yep. I haven't had it. I've done this now for 3, 4, 5 years, a lot of logs, and I've never seen any other fungus grown on it. If the shiitake, takes, and it does.
So that's why you want the bark intact. Anyway, you want the bark intact, and then you.
Well, yeah, the bark helps protect it from other. That's right. Other stuff, but the bark is the main thing with the bark is that it's moisture. Conserves the moisture, and the sugars that the fungus is growing on is right underneath the bark, and that's sapwood. Yes.
Can you eat the mushrooms if the slugs have a nibble bit, or is that?
Oh, sure.
Oh yeah. No, I eat them.
Okay.
Yeah. I eat the slugs too. Don't you?
Little garlic.
Yeah. That's right. Just a little more salt. So yeah. No, in fact. Okay, so some of these I'm sure had slug bites out of them. If that is unappealing to you, then now you know.
I'm totally okay with that.
So otherwise we got a few logs up here that we can do. I can kind of walk. Maybe I don't know. Put show of hands, maybe. Who would like to actually handle this process? Okay. So I might suggest maybe 2 people on 1 log. We kind of that way, just so because we have 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 logs. And so that should be enough for those who want to do it if they repair it. It doubles. So we can just I can walk through it with you, and if you want to sample, then I didn't bring you toothpicks, so you're gonna have to pass some toothpicks. Awesome. That's the beauty about extension programs. Someone's got whatever you need.
If you turn over your chair and you have a plant tag under your chair, you can take a log home with you.
Oh man, this is like.
And if that person doesn't want it, then make somebody else.
This is like Oprah Winfrey.
If you enjoyed this video, please let us know with your questions, comments, and suggestions for other classes and videos. We can be reached at mastergardener@pwcgov.org. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week.